Batman Arkham Knight, originally released in June of 2015. Available on all modern platforms. Available on Steam, Xbox, and PlayStation for $20, or $40 for the premium edition that includes all of the DLC. And available on Switch in the Batman Arkham Trilogy, retailing for $60, which does include Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, and Arkham Knight, along with all of their various DLCs. Batman Arkham Knight is the last game in the Arkham series, and its gameplay should be very familiar to you if you've played the other Arkham games. However, there are new elements present here. Shortly into the story, you get a new, fancy batsuit. It allows you to take out multiple criminals in one move, which, if used to its full effect, can make mini encounters a complete joke. You also finally have access to the Batmobile in this game. This allows you to drive around town. However, your grappling and gliding abilities are much more efficient for getting around. And the Batmobile converts into a tank, which sounds very interesting on the surface, but just leads to the most tedious parts of this game. However, there are times where the Batmobile is used to good effect, because you can remote control the Batmobile. And when you have the opportunity to use it as part of solving a puzzle, it actually is a welcome addition. But putting new gameplay elements aside, what's actually going on in this game? Well, there's quite a few things going on, some of which are new, some of which are wrapping up loose ends from the previous Arkham games. The game gets its title from a new man in town, calling himself the Arkham Knight. He, with the help of Scarecrow, are trying to take over all of Gotham, with the army of mercenaries they could somehow afford. In a story element I'm sure no one predicted, it turns out the Arkham Knight is someone from Batman's past. But while trying to deal with the Arkham Knight, Batman has problems all his own. It turns out that the infected Joker blood was not all accounted for at the end of Arkham City. There are 5 people who actually received the Joker's blood, and it's making them turn into the Joker. And Batman is desperately trying to find a cure for this predicament because he's one of the people that's slowly turning into the Joker. However, he seems to have things under control, at least within himself, pretty well, until early on in the story when he receives a dose of fear toxin from the Scarecrow. This causes an imaginary Joker to show up and taunt Batman throughout the rest of the game. And it is shown that throughout this story, the imaginary Joker is slowly gaining more influence over Batman's actions. But it does make me wonder if it's really the Joker taking over, or just the Batman's idea of the Joker taking over. But it doesn't matter, as their scenes together are always interesting. And of course, it doesn't hurt that you have Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill voicing the characters again. And that leads to a rather odd fact about the characters presented in Arkham Knight. Some characters, like Batman, the Joker, Riddler, Catwoman, are consistent with how they've been portrayed throughout the other Arkham games. But other characters, including major characters like James Gordon, the Scarecrow, Mad Hatter, and Killer Croc, are wildly different from how they were portrayed in earlier games. And for the most part, we're not really offered any explanation as for why this is. In one of the DLCs, we find out Killer Croc was experimented on, I guess explaining his differences. But why does Scarecrow come off as a completely different character than he did in Arkham Asylum? Why is Firefly completely consistent with the version we saw in Arkham Origins? But Commissioner Gordon seems like a completely different character compared to Arkham Asylum and Arkham City. And it's not that these portrayals of these characters are necessarily bad in this game. It's just odd that some characters are so radically different from their earlier appearances in games that are supposed to be part of the same universe. And it's made further confusing by the fact that it's only some characters. As with all of the Arkham games, there is a ton of side content, and that's even before the DLC that added even more side content. though not all of the side content was created equally. While there is interesting and even unsettling side content, like the Professor Pig story, or side content that just wraps up loose ends from previous games, such as with the Penguin and Two-Face. Some of it is just sort of tedious, however, like all of the tank battles you have to have with the Batmobile. Which, these would have been a nice change to the gameplay at times if they weren't so overused, as they aren't very challenging, but they are very time-consuming. And of course, the Riddler's back, with his trophies and puzzles hidden everywhere around the city. And this time he also built a few racetracks for the Batmobile. Still wondering how he pays for any of this. The Riddler also captured Catwoman, so midway through dealing with him you end up rescuing her. But if you actually want to fight and apprehend the Riddler, you have to do all of his stuff first. The DLC also added a lot more side content to the main story, mostly serving to wrap up loose ends again. As you might guess, it deals with characters that didn't show up in the base game. Ra's al Ghul, Mr. Freeze, etc. There was also DLC added that's independent of the main story. In these episodes, you control a character other than Batman, and they explain how certain events got set up in the main game, like Harley Quinn freeing Poison Ivy, or the Arkham Knight taking over the Black Mask's organization. These are mostly pretty short. So, is Batman, Arkham Knight, worth your time and money? Well, it is certainly more of a mixed bag than earlier Arkham titles. That's not to say that it's bad, it's just certain elements are overused. Mostly the Batmobile. The main story will take about 15 hours, with the side content maybe adding another 10. Meaning that's about 25 hours for what is a $20 game on most platforms. The DLC adds about another 10 hours, give or take, but that also doubles the price to $40 on Steam, PlayStation, and Xbox. On Switch, it's a rather moot point, as the only way to play Arkham Knight is in the Arkham Trilogy, which is $60, but you're getting 3 games and all of their DLC. However, being on Switch, you're also getting a compromised experience for Arkham Knight at least. But I do think the base game of Batman Arkham Knight is strong enough to justify the $20 price tag, and if you've been a fan of this series and Batman in general, it will be worthwhile to spend that extra $20 to play all of the extra content. So yes, I do fully recommend Batman Arkham Knight. Please do subscribe, comment, like, and tell your friends.